Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. We have special guest Meaghan with us today, and she is an astrologist, an astrologer. I will let you speak to like proper titling and things like that. So I know that Emily and I have both studied our own astrology enough, like a little bit, right? Like we get by, we see things come in, we see things go into retrograde and different things like this, and then we kind of look at it for us personally, and then how it affects us in our business. And I think I've seen some very interesting things. We'll pull in threads, which is how you and Emily met. But I've seen some interesting things as of late about astrology on there, where some people are all over the place with astrology, right? They either like live and die by it or they don't believe in it at all. They think it's fucking hogwash and it's not real, right? Um, and then I've seen some interesting posts about people being like, multimillionaires, billionaires, trillionaires, like big business people have their own personal astrologers for their business. So I would love maybe if we just kind of start there, you introduce yourself, we'll start there and then kind of dovetail into where else it goes.
Hmm. Well, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Meaghan. I am an astrologer. I think that is the correct term that most people use. I've heard people use the word astrologist before, but most people say astrologer. So I study the movement of the cosmos. So not just the planets, there are also asteroids and stars, and obviously the sun and the moon that we study in astrology. And you can get very, very detailed, which is why I love this practice because it is a never-ending study. People, if someone tells you, I know everything there is to know about astrology and I'm an expert, I would I would say gently walk away, quietly walk away.
I feel like
Because
that's true with just about anything, right? Like you
that's
can
true.
never know everything about anything.
That's true. It is a lifelong study and practice. I have been studying since 2017, and I would definitely not call myself an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I think that um, obviously I know what I'm talking about, and I share lots of things with people, but I think that there's a humility that also comes with astrology where we have to be aware that we are making interpretations based on our own environment, based on our own personal experiences. And so while we can try to remove those and be as open-minded and as unbiased as possible, there's always going to be a little bit of bias when you communicate with people, especially, if people aren't aware of those biases, right? So in that sense, I say that I am an interpreter. Um, I interpret the stars as I see them, and I try to give people context for how the movements of the stars and the planets might impact them. And my favorite thing to do is to look at someone's birth chart. You might hear people call it a natal chart as well, but it's the placement of the planets and the stars and the asteroids and all of these beautiful things that are in our solar system at the exact moment of your birth, which is so unique that each individual person will not, that same chart will not manifest again for 25,000 years.
Oh, that makes sense because of the 25,000 year cycle. 25,
So,
26,000 years. Yeah.
yep.
Nice.
So even if you're a twin and you're born within minutes, or even if you're born, there are people born within minutes or seconds of each other, that chart is not exactly the same because the minutes and the seconds all represent something different, a different, smaller manifestation of that energy. Which is why when people say, "Oh, well, I'm not unique. I don't have anything to bring to the table," um, right? You can just laugh and say, "Actually, no, you are unique."
That's an
There
inside joke. So what do you bring to the table? That's an inside joke.
are... Yeah, right. You're the only person that exists from this point until 25,000 years, right? And your unique gifts manifest themselves in specific ways based on your astrology chart. And I also think that it's important for people to remember that based on your astrology chart, it's not just like everyone who has a moon in Taurus is always going to have that same manifestation of that moon in Taurus. It also depends on the way that they grew up, the environment that they grew up in, the people that they surrounded themselves with in childhood, but then also like as they grow. There are manifestations that are what we call the shadow side of each of these zodiacs, placements, and planets that can bring us down and make us feel really heavy. And then there are also pieces of each planet and each zodiac sign that lift us up and help us grow and help us expand. And you can see in people, you can see, oh, well, that's kind of maybe a lower vibrational energy of that particular zodiac sign. I wonder what that person is experiencing that might manifest those particular uh, characteristics in them. And it almost gives you an insight into, oh gosh, having maybe a little bit more compassion for that person, which is why I love astrology. And we were talking before this, Emily, you're talking about how important it is, I think, for leaders, especially for entrepreneurs, to understand their astrology chart. I liken astrology to another tool that we can use for emotional intelligence, the cultivation of emotional intelligence, which is a very important skill that I believe entrepreneurs need to have. If you don't have grit, if you don't have resilience, if you don't have self-awareness, you're going to have a really hard time being a leader, being an entrepreneur.
But you're probably not gonna make it. Let's be honest. Like you're probably not gonna make it if you don't have those things.
Right. Or you make it, you fake it, right? And you quote unquote make it. But at some point, there's going to be something that, some sort of roadblock that you're going to reach, and you're not going to be able to overcome that roadblock. So I think that's where astrology in particular can be a very unique way of cultivating those skills, cultivating self-awareness, cultivating resilience, cultivating grit, cultivating optimistic thinking, all of those types of things. Um, when you have a better understanding of who you are, who you were born to be, and you also don't make excuses for those things anymore. And you also don't feel like you're a failure because of things that you might think, oh, I really hate that about myself. Why am I like that? Well, you're like that for a reason. There may be some lessons that you're supposed to learn. There may be a lesson in that tension. There may be a lesson in that characteristic or trait of yourself that you find to be frustrating. And that is why I love astrology in particular, because I have noticed in myself and all of the other people that I've read charts for that when I say to them, okay, well, your moon is in Taurus, and so you may have experienced this, this, and this, or you may feel this way. There's a light bulb that goes off. And all of a sudden, people think, oh, yeah, I am that way. Oh, well, maybe that isn't such a bad thing. Or, oh, yeah, I can see how I'm operating from the lower vibration of that particular uh, aspect or that particular sign. But here are the higher vibration aspects that I could maybe get a little curious about and see if I can embody more of those. So,
I literally just had this moment yesterday. I sent Julie a message and was like, oh my goodness, I just had this light bulb moment of my North Node being in Pisces and my South Node being in Virgo. And one of those lessons is to learn to surrender and let go more. But I was born and raised where it was never safe to surrender and do that. And I had to control everything. I needed everything. And then that showed up in the business of like, no, Julie, we need a fucking strategy for everything. Like, we got to control this shit. And Julie's like, what? Like, girl. So it was this whole moment. That was literally yesterday. And I've known my North Node and my South Node for quite some time. But like you said, that awareness of like, oh my goodness, that makes sense now why I operate the way that I operate. And then you take that into your business and you start looking at these patterns, and it's mind blowing.
yeah. Well, and you're having your nodal return right now. Did you know that?
No, but go on. Tell
Yeah.
me more.
Do you mean because the North Node is currently in Pisces?
Oh,
Oh
yes.
yeah, she knew
I did
that.
know that. Yes.
Yeah. So when planets or aspects or, um, anything comes back to the same place that it was in your chart, that is called return,
Okay.
right? So every year
So
on your
my
birthday,
North Node is in Aries,
yeah.
and
So
we
you
just
just had it.
moved from Aries now into
Correct.
this is okay.
Mine is also in Aries. So I just had my nodal return too. Yep.
So tell me, what does the nodal return mean in this aspect?
Yeah, good question. So, for most people, a nodal return indicates a time when you are recentering to your purpose. So, what often happens, and it's kind of like a 2.5 year period when the nodes are in a specific sign. And you can have a nodal return or you can have like a reverse nodal return. So that would be for you, that would be when the south node is in Pisces and the north node is in Virgo, right? So it's
Oh,
kind of like just the opposite. Um,
shit.
so when you have
We're
your
not even prepared for that.
yeah, right. Oh my God, mind blown. So when you have your true nodal return, which is when the south and north node are in the exact same place they were when you were born, you are truly coming back to trying to balance your dharma or your purpose, or the place that you're meant to grow into in this life, which is your north node, and your south node, which is where you feel comfortable, the things that you're really good at, the ways that you experienced life maybe early on. So for you, Emily, that was kind of like the controlling, very like regimented, structured Virgo energy, right? You're really good at that because you experience that a lot, not just in this lifetime, but potentially also in past lifetimes, right? It's something that you come into this lifetime already having mastered. So there's no growth there, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But what happens is that when we lean too much into our south node, there's no growth. We're stagnant. And so throughout life, we're being called to reach across the aisle, across the zodiac to the sign that is opposite and to lean into that energy because that is where most of our growth will happen in this lifetime.
And I felt that ever since I knew North Node was going into Pisces, I felt that. I felt it in my soul. Like I felt that I've
Like
seen this
a
sign.
month before, right?
And I was
Or
like,
longer.
this shit's gonna be like huge for me. And I continue to see those signs and I continue to lean into that. And yeah, it's eye-opening.
Which is so fucking interesting. So, like with mine being in Aries, there was a point within the last, I would say 6 months or so. Emily's like, "Who the fuck are you? Like, where did this human come from?" I'm like, "This is me. Like, this is me." And like, I'm just like, "Oh, okay. Like, it's
Yeah.
cool. It's cool to be me again. Like, it's fine."
Yeah. So sometimes what might happen is that, and I'm saying might because, right, it just depends on your own personal life experiences, where you are, what you've accomplished. You may experience almost like a redirection or recentering, or maybe even a dark night where all of a sudden you were not moving in the direction of your North Node, you were not moving toward growth, and the universe or energy or whatever you want to call it brings something into your consciousness, brings something into your path that pushes you toward growth again. And if you don't have the tools and the techniques like emotional intelligence, then you may feel really uncentered. You may feel really ungrounded. You may feel like you have lost your sense of self. And so, this time when we're having our nodal return is an opportunity to rediscover who you are and to recenter yourself toward the direction of growth, toward your destiny, toward your dharma, which is just another fancy word for destiny, right? Purpose in this lifetime.
Makes me so excited for you right now.
Stay tuned.
My husband's North Node is in Pisces too, so he's about to experience it.
Nice. How funny is that? I love how the universe works like that, right? Like we're both North Node in Aries, and our partners are both. I mean, because Emily is more than just a business partner. Like we're best friends. We feel like sisters, and that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about this Gemini. I'm sorry, this I I said that because my Mercury, let's talk about this.
Mercury.
I say that because my Mercury
Mercury's
is
in Gemini.
Gemini for me. Yep. And so and my sun, or I'm sorry, my moon is in Scorpio.
Mhm.
And so I always used to think that my whole, like, I will fucking cut you and it will be deep and it will be swift and you will probably never recover from that. I always used to think that was the Scorpio in me. And then I learned about my Mercury and Gemini. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, it just opened up a whole new world for me. And I'm like, ooh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is your moon in Scorpio, but
Oh, well.
but there is a whole different level when you learn how these two pieces work together. So, at its most basic form, the moon is our emotions, right? It's our subconscious. It's the way we feel about ourselves, kind of like in our core. It's our heart center. It is represented by the zodiac sign of Cancer. So, it's very much like a, like a very soft and subconscious place for us in our chart. Then we have Mercury, which is kind of the opposite. Mercury is our thoughts. It is the way that we communicate. It's the way that we learn. It is very much a conscious um, experience, a conscious placement in our astrology chart. And so when you begin to understand the levels of, what do these planets represent, and then what do they represent for me based on where they are in the zodiac, that can open up a whole new way of thinking about yourself, right? Because as entrepreneurs, we often have to exist in both places. We exist in our hearts, heart space, in our emotion, in our subconscious, because we're constantly having to battle with things like imposter syndrome and, questioning whether or not the decision that we made is going to move us in the right direction or if it's going to cost us, XYZ, questioning whether or not we made the right types of partnerships, questioning whether or not we are good enough to show up for our clients every single day, right? There's this constant emotional battle that we have as entrepreneurs, the highs and the lows. It's very, very intimate. But then we also have the Mercury, right, which is kind of like that higher level functioning of the every single day types of decisions that we have to make and the way that we learn, the material that we learn to continue to grow and to show up for our clients and for, this industry and the space that we're in. The way that we communicate, which is a huge piece of being an entrepreneur. We have to market ourselves, which is, that can fall underneath your Mercury sign. How do you market yourself? And so when you understand what zodiac sign, but then even more, if you look at your own astrology chart, you can also see what house um, your planet, those planets are in. That can give you a really good understanding of how to, support your emotional health and how to speak more clearly so that people understand you and you feel more magnetic. So we are going to use all of us as an example. You ready?
I'm here for it.
Yeah, I've been ready for this for like 17 weeks and I didn't even know about this for 17 weeks.
All right, so Julie, we're going to start with you. So you said your moon is in Scorpio.
Yeah.
So there are many layers to what this could represent for you. The first is an archetype. So I'm going to share that archetype with you, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. The archetype that I believe feels most well aligned with the moon in Scorpio is the penetrator. Because Scorpio is all about penetrating down to the most distilled and like true essence of something. Scorpio is not afraid to go deep. And when you think about emotions, having a moon in Scorpio means that you are not afraid of emotional depth. Now, it could go either way, right? You could have so much emotional depth. You could have so many heavy, intense feelings that it scares the shit out of you. And that would be someone who doesn't understand that placement, which I think is a lot of us, right? Because Scorpio, of all of the zodiac signs, is the most
Misunderstood.
misunderstood.
Yes. It's like my
Scorpio
favorite. It's one of my favorite things in my chart. It's
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite things.
Mm-hmm. Because Scorpio's related to secrets, right? There's a lot of stuff that's happening underneath the surface with Scorpio. Is a water sign. So if you think about things like the ocean, all the stuff that's happening underneath the surface of the ocean that we never see, but it's still there. It's still happening. And so it can feel very intense to have a moon in Scorpio because you are constantly picking up on not only all the little tiny nuances and emotions that you yourself are feeling, but also all the little tiny emotions and nuances that are happening around you. It's a very intuitive sign, intuitive placement. So when we talk about the placement of particular planets in certain zodiac signs, we have what we call and I can't remember the word right off the top of my head. Of course, I knew this. But we have four placements that either feel really, really good, two that feel really, really good, or two that feel really, really bad in specific zodiac signs. Two that feel more expansive and feel like there's more opportunity, and two that feel a little bit more tense and a little bit more difficult. And it just so happens that your moon in Scorpio is a little bit more of a difficult placement. Basically, it just means that the moon does not necessarily enjoy being in Scorpio. Because there is so much volatility, because there is so much depth, it can feel really intense and really overwhelming, right? And so it's the goal of someone who has a moon in Scorpio is to get comfortable with the depth, is to get comfortable with the penetration, with the ability to see through people's bullshit and just be like, yeah, actually, you're not a good person. And I'm going to stand in that because I know, I know.
This
Right?
is hilarious because how many times have like Emily and I've had these conversations where I'm like, yo, like I'll feel grief before the thing really happens and shows up in my life, or like the second someone pulls their energy away, I'm like, it's completely shifted. I mean, she does the same thing, but it's like wild.
Hmm. Yep. 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 So that is your emotional barometer, if you will. So how does that work with your Mercury? So your moon is very deep, right? Moon placements in general can tend to be like a more deep and intimate placement in general, but yours in Scorpio is like super deep. Then you have your Mercury in Gemini. Mercury is ruled by Gemini, so it's very happy to be there. Remember, I talked about like those two placements that feel really good and expansive, and those two places that feel very tense and maybe a little more difficult. Mercury is in domicile in Gemini, which means it's at home. So this probably feels much more comfortable to you, this placement. You communicate very clearly with people, typically. It's probably not difficult for you to pick up new material. Um, let's see, what else am I thinking about? You are quick on your feet. You're a quick thinker. Um, People may come to you when they are looking for solutions outside the box solutions, maybe even because you might say something or think of something that somebody else hasn't thought of before. You are the witty one. That's the archetype that I call Mercury in Gemini. So,
See,
how,
humor is not just a trauma response. We had this conversation the other day. I was like, at what point does your humor stop being a trauma response and it's just inherently part of who you are? And this is the answer to that question.
this is you. This is who you are.
I'm a funny fucker. I've said it before and I'll say it again.
Yeah. So how do you balance those two things, right? Because Gemini and Mercury are very surface level typically. There's not a lot of depth that comes with that particular placement. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just that Gemini is it's mutable energy. So it's constantly changing and shifting and seeing new perspectives and trying new things, which doesn't give you a lot of space for depth. So you do have this kind of push and pull between a desire for a lot of depth and penetration and a deep understanding of yourself, right? But then also this part of your brain that's just like, oh, but what if we tried this? Oh, but what if we did this? Oh, but what, so it's just kind of this push and pull between those two types of energy that I would say just to get curious about and see how blending those two things and honoring those two things and realizing when one is more important and when another one might be more useful could support you.
Man, there's so much gold in all of this. Because I'm like, as you go through, like whenever I have readings done, I'm very like instantly, I'm sure you saw it in me, right? Like I closed off and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna
Mm-hmm.
listen, let it land, see what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like once I've processed a little bit, I'm like, oh, okay, it's safe to open back up. Um, it makes so much because like as a child, I was so like deeply emotional in both directions, right? That
Mm-hmm.
it was not safe for because I had a parent who couldn't regulate her own emotions. So then
Mm-hmm.
obviously she couldn't support me through my emotional regulation. So then it
Mm-hmm.
became unsafe, right? And so then having to learn how to do that in business, like how to set boundaries and communicate properly, communicate what I need, communicate what I'm feeling, communicate what I'm thinking. Like it's then this like push pull until you learn how. And thank God for Emily because like the communication is the thing that is I think deepened the most and helped us to grow the most like
Yeah.
individually and in business.
Mm-hmm. And I will say that even though communication may come more easily to someone with a Mercury and Gemini, it's unless there is a deep moment of introspection, it may always be surface level. So that's just something to be mindful of, is that Gemini almost like can't go deep, right? There's just like this sense of lightness and childlike energy that comes with Gemini, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right?
And so many other things make sense. Like my dad is a Gemini son.
Yeah.
Okay, got
Hmm.
it.
Right. But then another word that comes up often for Scorpio is trust. Scorpio does not trust very easily. So, especially when your moon is in Scorpio, you may not feel emotionally safe with a lot of people. It may take you quite a while to feel like you can open up emotionally to people because you may have had experiences where you tried to be deep. You tried to open up and that person just stabbed you, right? Or took you in a place that you did not want to go, that you did not feel comfortable going. And so there is also that trust factor in not only feeling like you need to cultivate trust in other people, but most importantly, cultivating self-trust.
And this all lands. So like it's so good. So good.
Yay. All right. So when we talk about business and we talk about the placement of the moon and Mercury, I like to think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So our moon is at the very bottom. So it's all of our basic needs. If we can understand the archetype of our moon and fulfill those basic needs, then we can move up into our intellectual space, which is Mercury, right? So if you can understand and create supports and guardrails for your moon placement, then you can begin to discover and explore and get curious about your Mercury placement. It's almost kind of like you have to have one before you can have the other. So as business owners, I think that it's really, really important to understand and support yourself emotionally before you can even consider doing any sort of other high level skill or high level strategy or, uh, you know, tactic, right? You're not going to be able to scale your business the way that you want to scale your business unless you have those baseline tools and, things that you need to support yourself emotionally, right? Because if you're not emotionally regulated, then nothing is going to work. So there's that one.
Shit. So many things make sense, right?
Oopsies.
No, it's fucking magic. It's magic. Because it like looking back, I mean, I know I've connected so many dots just in the few minutes we've been talking. And Emily, I can see her eyes going too, like, oh yeah, this makes sense, and this makes sense, and this makes sense, and like, ooh.
All right. Emily, you ready?
I'm ready. I'm here for it.
All right. So we're going to start with your moon, which, as we talked about, is our subconscious. It is the most intimate part of our chart. I shouldn't say most intimate. There are a couple of intimate placements, but this is very intimate placement. Your moon is in Libra. You are the balancer. You like things to be balanced. You like things to be equitable. You like to create equitable spaces for people. I shouldn't say you are. You could be a people pleaser. You could be a person who, when everyone else is happy and there is stability and balance in everyone else's emotions, then you feel good. Everything feels great. But when there is no balance, when someone is angry, when someone feels disappointed, especially when you feel like you've disappointed someone else, that can be really scary because things are not balanced.
Well, that explains the recovery people pleaser for
Yeah.
a long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that whenever anyone has, like my South Node, for instance, is in Libra. And so that is a place where I, came into this lifetime having no room for growth anymore because I've already been there, done that. And so in some ways, I feel very similarly to you that it's like a recovering people pleaser. Like you got to get over it. You're really good at it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get you anywhere. It's not going to be helpful if you're not aware that you're putting everyone else's needs before you.
Yeah.
And I think that the key to a moon placement in Libra is understanding the balance between me and we. That when you are happy, everyone else is happy. When everyone else is happy, you're happy, right? There's got to be this symbiotic relationship between the happiness of you and the happiness of the people around you. There cannot be a full cup. You cannot have a full cup if you're constantly just like giving to other people, right? You've got to be able to receive as well. You have got to know that you are just as worthy of receiving nourishment from others as you are of giving it to other people. It's important.
Also makes sense on the connections and the business connections. We just had this conversation about making connections in business. I'm a 4/6 profile line in manifestor and human design. And I always felt like when I start to feel like I'm making so many connections and I'm not getting anything in return, then there's no reciprocity there. I'm like, all right, I'm done, y'all. Like, I'm done, no more. So this also ties into that, which makes sense.
Reciprocity and equity is a huge deal for someone with a moon in Libra. You emotionally, you have like almost a visceral reaction when you see that someone is not being treated equitably. You're like, what the fuck is this? And how can I change this because this person deserves to experience XYZ. So what am I going to do about it? Right? There's this like little passionate, which I think comes from Libra being a cardinal sign. Cardinals is the initiator, the instigator. Libra is also an air sign. So there's like an intellectualism that comes with that as well, kind of working through what is it that I can do? What is it that I can give to make sure that this experience is meaningful for the people around me? So that's you.
Interesting.
Yeah, so being the balancer, being the scales, that can feel very overwhelming, especially if you believe that balance is something that only has to be achieved once, right? balance is not something that can ever be achieved and then done. That's it. I got balance. I'm good. Right? Balance is something that you are achieving every single day. Every single day, you're checking in with yourself to see how much energy do I have to give today? What are the things that I'm required to do today? Who are the people that I have to show up for? And once you understand that balance means being able to check in with yourself and to shift things as needed and not feel any sort of guilt around making those shifts, I think that is when you can really step into the Libra archetype and feel really grounded and excited about the energy.
Interesting.
Okay, so that's the bottom of your hierarchy, is that balancing energy, that like equity, reciprocity, um, balance between me and we, right? Then we have your Mercury, which is an Aquarius.
Which is also in the 4th house.
Okay, interesting. So the 4th house is related to the moon. Interesting. Okay. So your Mercury being in Aquarius, the archetype is the innovator. So you, in some similar ways to Gemini, you have this innovative brain, this like thought process that people will come to you if they're feeling stuck and they feel like they need a new idea. Aquarius is related to Uranus, the planet of Uranus, which is all about forward motion. It's related to new technology, things like artificial intelligence. Um, so you have this, and it's almost like avant-garde. If you think of avant-garde as being things that are maybe a little bit more progressive than most people are used to, that is the way that you communicate. That is how you share information with people, through ways that may feel maybe a little uncomfortable to them, but will move people in the direction that they need to go. Because you also have this ability to be able to see things, see like the longer vision, and see the perspective of, okay, well, if we want to get here, we have to do this, and this. You're the one who most likely has gone out and taken those steps before. And then you come back and you share that information with people and you say, okay, this is what I did. I'm going to take you on this journey with me. I'm going to take you to this place. It might feel a little scary, but trust me, I can do it. I've done it before. You're kind of like a trailblazer.
Yeah, my human designs taught me that.
Yeah,
But that's the cool thing about taking both of these tools together, right? Because they just kind of complement each other.
they
Where
do.
I remember when I found out I was a manifester, so I was like, shit. But the person that had done my reading, it was kind of more like a projection versus a reading. Here's the date and the facts.
Hmm.
And so knowing that and seeing that also showed me like, okay, now I have this tool and now I can integrate it in the way that I want.
Hmm. Yeah. How do you feel about technology?
I love it.
Yep.
Here
She
for
and
it.
Chat GPT are in an intimate
Yeah.
romantic relationship. I
Yeah.
mean, it's on and off again sometimes, but for the most part, they've been going solid for
Hmm.
quite some time now.
Sometimes deep sea comes in there and takes over, but yeah.
Mercury in Aquarius, right? That's how you communicate. You communicate through in ways that other people may be like, what the hell is she doing? Like, it doesn't make any sense, or like, I'm afraid to touch that because that's something that's new and scary. And
Let's
you're
talk
like,
about that doesn't make
nope.
sense part. Like we've had so many times where like she's in regards to like the way we communicate with one another. She's like, I think you have another friend that it's almost like they can read your mind. Where like with you and I, it's not always the case. And I'm like, what are you talking about right now? Like we just went from 0 to 175 and I don't even know what's going on right now.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
we've seen
Aquarius.
that We've seen that a few times, and it depends on which friend I'm talking to. That's the style that I have to adapt to.
Yeah, Aquarius is very forward thinking. Gemini is much more in the present. It's much more like, okay, let's do one thing at a time. Because Gemini also can change their mind very easily because they're mutable, whereas Aquarius is fixed. So what often happens with a fixed energy is that they get their mind set on one thing and then that's the thing that they're going to do. There's not a lot of deviation, which can be really frustrating for someone who has mutable energy, who's like, yeah, but what if something comes up and we have to change? Or what if, like, it doesn't go the way that we thought it was going to go? The fixed
My
energy is
very
like,
go with the flow. Yeah.
right. The fixed energy is like, well, it's gonna fucking go the way that I say it's gonna go. Like, because it is. Like, right. So there's that sense of like the mutable, the Gemini Mercury might come up to the Aquarius Mercury and say, hey, let me like help you just be a little bit more loose. Let me help you be a little bit more in the present moment. Let me help you when things don't go the way that you think they're going to go. Come up with a solution that will keep you on track, that will help you continue toward your vision, um, but also maintain that elasticity that you really need to have in order to not lose your mind. So they complement each other really well, I think, or they can complement one another.
It's like yin and yang all the time.
Which is how we often describe ourselves, like to other people when we're talking about how we work together and how we work in business. It's so funny because we're so different. We're so different, but complement each other very well.
Yeah. Yep. I see that. I see that. It'd be interesting to look at your full charts too to see if there's any. There's this thing that we can do in astrology.
We both have Aries and Venus.
Venus and
and
Aries.
Aries. Yeah.
So this Venus retrograde is probably like, rah! Like,
For one of us, it is.
yeah, I think it probably depends on where the placement is, right? Because if it's at the end of Aries, then you may not feel it as much. But if it's at the beginning of Aries, which is where the Venus retrograde is currently happening, that you might feel it more intensely. What was I going to say? Oh, so there's this thing that you can do, and I'm not sure if you've ever done it, but it might be interesting as business partners. It's called the synastry chart, where you place each other's charts on top of each other, and you can see the similarities. You can see how they speak to each other. And I find a lot of people do it for like couples, romantic couples, but it can absolutely be done for anyone who has an intimate relationship. So friends, family members. Sometimes people will do it like, I want to know how my mom and I get along. So let's do a synastry chart. Anyway, it would be interesting for y'all to do that to see how your charts speak to one another.
I feel like we've done it with human design,
oh
but
yeah,
not
there
with
you go.
astrology.
Yeah, so you can do it with astrology.
Yeah. Okay. Like it's so interesting. All of this is so interesting.
Yeah.
Emily's gonna be off video probably because her internet's
Oh,
Mercury retrograde retrograding for her.
listen. Yeah.
I don't normally get on Mercury when it's in retrograde because normally I'm not super affected by it. This one has been extra.
Well, I think that's because it's concurrently happening with Venus retrograde in almost the exact same place. So it's an amplification of energy,
Yeah.
right? Plus,
It's
there's
fun.
also Neptune that's right there, and Saturn is there, and the sun is there, and yeah,
Saturn. Let's talk about that spicy little devil because I am a
please.
Cancer rising and
Oh, wow. So Mars has been giving you a real treat for the last.
We've been touch and go for a hot couple of months here. We really like the level of frustration and annoyance and like just how quick I can be like pissed about something. Like we had this happen in business not too long ago. Where it's like there was a relationship that was not at all what we thought it was going to be, and it went fucking sideways real fast. And I have not been that level of anger. Emily's like, you've never been like this in business, never.
Yep.
And I was like hot to trot doesn't even like begin to describe the level of anger that I was feeling with that situation, which was
Welcome.
wild.
Yep. Welcome to Mars and Cancer crossing your ascendant. Yeah. Yeah.
But this, I think, is also why the tools like self-development and self-development tools that we learn along the way, especially in business, are so helpful because it's like when I know that I'm at that level, it's like, what do you do to get back to center? What do you do to get
Absolutely.
grounded? Right. And also knowing like my human design and these different things. And like your ass needs to go sit outside. I'm a projector. So it's like, I need to time the fuck out and I need to be out of everyone else's energy. And I just
Mhm.
it's funny because it's almost like I will think that I need to take a nap. I don't need to take a nap. I just need to be away from everybody else
Yep.
and out of it for a hot minute. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's just, so that's why I love when people are like,
Yeah.
these things aren't real. They don't make sense. They don't, it's not a real thing. And I'm like,
I
listen.
I often find that people, well, okay. So there's two ways that I think people could go when they say, "Oh, this isn't real." Number one, it could be that they had a really bad experience where someone did try to explain something to them. It didn't make sense, and or it triggered them.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And they said, "Oh, this is not real," because they didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was too much, right? So that's the one way that I see people say, "Well, this isn't real." The other way is that they're afraid. They're afraid. There's something that they have seen or heard that scares the hell out of them as far as learning more information about this particular tool. And they don't want to go there.
Yeah.
They want to stay in their safe zone, and they would prefer to just kind of plug their ears and put their head in the sand and just exist where they are. And I think
Yep.
that that happens with a lot of people when they're on the cusp of a spiritual awakening,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Because if we look at the nodes, right? And the last time North Node was in Pisces was like oh 06, oh 07, oh 07, oh 08, something like this.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was
And I
like,
think back, like I was in college, I was having migraines like a motherfucker because I was on the cusp, right? I was on the cusp of those psychic gifts, just being like, boom, here we are, right? And I kept shutting it down and I kept shutting it down. I kept shutting it down, right? And so it's super, super interesting to look at like the astrology where things are at now, where they were, where you were in your life the last time this placement happened.
Hmm.
That's wild.
And I think that is where most people can get when you're thinking about transits. I think that's where you can glean a lot of knowledge about how the transits will impact you in the future. Astrology is all about pattern recognition. So if you can go back and you can see, okay, this is when Venus retrograde was in Aries, all of the different times. What was happening in my life when Venus retrograde was in Aries?
Do we have the next Venus retrograde on our calendars? We have the next Mars
yeah,
retrograde in Cancer in our calendars for sure. Just so you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Venus and Mars, particularly, both go retrograde at a little bit of different times, but it's more or less every 2-ish years. And it'll obviously be in a different sign next time. And I believe it's every 8 years it comes back, and it's right about in the same place that it was. So every 8-ish years, there's
In
a
my
an
head, I just went, shit.
yeah, right. So the 8 years ago was the last time that we had this Aries Venus retrograde experience. And because, because of the movement of
Writing
the
that down.
planets, it'll always move um, a little bit further back. So it's kind of complicated, but anyway, that's a little much. But I actually wanted to talk on when we talk about pattern recognition. One of the things that I think, Julie, you said at the beginning is that one of the reasons why people say, well, this stuff isn't real is because they don't hear about it kind of like in the mainstream. And then one of the things that people bring up was like, oh, well, a bunch of billionaires and presidents and all these people, they have their own astrologers. And that may or may not be the case currently. I imagine that there are probably a lot more people than we think who use these tools, but maybe just don't talk about them because they're either afraid to talk about them or they're afraid to be judged. But if we think back to a time when
I can
these
even
types
see
of,
people being like, this is
yeah,
like my secret weapon, right? Like, I'm not going to tell y'all that I have an astrologer and I keep my shit
true,
on point because,
true,
right?
true,
Elon, who are you using?
true. True. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Because it's like some sort of, because astrology has been up until very recently something that people just haven't really talked about a lot. It's been something that has been taboo, or some people use the term woo-woo, or questionable, or pseudoscience, whatever you want to call it. Um, but there were times in history where astrology was more acceptable. I think that obviously now is one of those times. But even if we look back in history, we think about people like Nostradamus. Nostradamus was an astrologer. Galileo was an astrologer. Of course, he was also an astronomer, right? So he looked at the stars and did all of the scientific calculations about their orbits and blah, blah, blah. But he also used astrology. He absolutely had to have, because it was during the Renaissance, and those were the types of things that people were experimenting with. Also during the Age of Enlightenment, which was in the 1800s, right, like around the end of the Civil War, people were beginning to ask themselves more deep questions. And I like to use the example of Nostradamus being the astrologer for King Henry in France. He was like he was part of the court of King Henry and Catherine de Medici.
See, King
He
Henry knew. He knew
yeah.
what was up.
Yeah. So, I mean, they consulted him before they made large decisions about like who to go to war with, or how much money to charge people in taxes, or, what types of titles to give the people that were in their court. These people had a lot of influence and a lot of power. And I think that it's important to remember that when we think about using astrology, there is absolutely a sector of people who will use it for nefarious reasons. Because it is a system of pattern recognition, there are people who will say, I can predict the future. I can tell you based on the patterns of what happened when Venus was in retrograde back in 18 something something something, this happened. Or the last time that Neptune was in Aries was the Civil War. So, oh my God, we're going to have another Civil War.
Right. And
Right?
then all the fear mongering comes in, which is
That's a
just another
big
form
one.
of control. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think it's really, really important that when you're learning more about these types of modalities, that you're beginning to think about discernment and you're using your critical thinking skills, which again is a really, really important part of being an entrepreneur. You cannot listen to every single piece of advice that you're given, right? If you were to listen to every business guru and use all of their advice, not only would those pieces of advice often contradict one another, but maybe an 18th of them would actually work for you.
Right. Right. And this is an interesting, beautiful key, because the one thing that we always work with clients on is listening to themselves and what is true for you.
Mhm.
Because you can get sold so many things, right? Well, it's worked for 100 people. Yeah, but you're not those 100 people. Like, you are different.
Mhm.
It's like someone has a projector, like someone giving me advice as a projector that would be helpful for like a generator. Like, no, bro, that's not how I operate. It's not gonna
Mhm.
work, right? And then I would go into a mode of like, well, why can't I? Right. And then you shut down on yourself and you think that, oh, then like you said earlier about imposter syndrome, you go into like, well, maybe business isn't right, and maybe it's not what I meant to do, and maybe it's, you did all of these things, right? And it's
Mhm.
just because you haven't been given the proper tools for your human.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think about the story, parable, whatever you want to call it, that was associated with Albert Einstein. I'm not sure if he was the one who actually said it, but where you can't get a fish to climb a tree, right? Like you give the same assessment to all different animals, and sure, the cat's going to be able to climb the tree, but the fish isn't going to be able to, and then the fish is going to think they're a failure. No, they just aren't supposed to
Exactly,
climb a tree.
exactly, exactly, exactly. All right, so we are almost at time. Like, I can't believe that this is already, dude. Gosh, this is awesome. We are definitely going to have you back on again because this was epic. How can people find you if they want to learn
Yeah.
more about their personal astrology or how it can help them in their business?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram and Threads at megan.m.dunham, and I will give you the information so you can put it in the show notes because my name is spelled really funny. And you can also find me on my website, meaghanmdunham.com. You can book an astrology reading with me. I also have particular astrology readings for business owners called Stellar Strategy Sessions, where we look at the transits of the next 3 months and help you build a quarterly strategic plan for your business.
Wow, this is what everybody's been missing.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for coming on. This has been fucking epic. Like,
Ah.
I can't even begin to tell you.
You know, it's Venus Day and it's my favorite day of the week. So,
It is Venus Day.
It is
mhm.
4/4.
Yes,
And it is
4/4
4
portal.
4. Yeah, that's right. If y'all don't know what that is, just look it up. Just look it up. All right, Meaghan, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. Guys, go check her out because she's going to be able to save your ass. I can promise you that. All right, guys, until next time.